and welcome back to Arlene Knits and Sews. In today's tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make a beginner's jumper, jersey knitted sweater. It is a pattern I designed when I had very limited skills. Basically all I knew was how to cast on, how to knit the basic garter stitch. That is the beginner one that we're all knitting at the moment. And I knew how to increase and decrease, which we've already gone through in making the blankets, in making the slippers, in making, what was the last thing we did? That was them. And I knew how to cast off, so that's it, that's all I had. And I wanted a jersey, and I came up with this pattern, and I'm going to teach you today how to make one yourself. So you can grab yourself a pair of needles. I've got a pair of straight size 5 needles, and I've got myself some white wool. I'm probably going to need between 4 and 5 of these balls. They are 100 grams each, and yeah, we're going to get going. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cast on 10 stitches, and we're going to knit it until it fits comfortably around our head, very similar to the beanie without stretching it. And I will get back to you on exactly how many lines that is now. So we're going to cast on 10 stitches and go from there. So we cast on 10 stitches, and then I knitted for 45 centimeters. And how I got that number was I measured the circumference of my head with the measuring tape, and that was about 50 centimeters. I do have a small head, but and then I took a little bit off because I don't want this neck to be obscenely gapey. I sort of wanted to still have a bit of structure, integrity in the neckline. And once we move on to the next phase, it is actually going to pull that neck a bit wider. So it was 10 centimeters, and then I knitted for 45 centimeters, and here's my final piece. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cast off with that last stitch. You're going to now crochet the 2 ends together, like so. So very simple, you just go stitch for stitch in the one end and through like that. Like that. And you're going to crochet all the way through until you've crocheted these 2 pieces together completely, all the way through to this end here. When you get to the end, just pull that out a little bit so you don't lose it. And what we're going to do next is, hey everybody, we're going to pick up these stitches along the side. So you're basically going to squash it in half like this, and we're going to go in to all of these little lumpy bumpy stitches, and we're going to put our needle in there. I'll show you exactly what I mean now. What I would recommend you do first though is you count how many of these lumps, when I say lump I mean this thing here, this part here. Count them out so you know exactly how many you're going to be picking up now. So for example, my piece has exactly 59 bumps here, so I'm going to just divide that. I'm going to round that up to 60. It'll be fine. And I'm going to pick up 30 bumps now. So you can just pop your that stitch on the needle and adjust it to fit. And then we're going to go into the first one over here, like this. You're literally just going to slide your needle into this area here, and the next one, and the next one, like so. This wool is splitting, so making my life a little bit harder. So I'm actually just going to go into the one below it. then the next one, the next one, and I'm going to do this until I've picked up 30 stitches on my needle here. So 30 of these little bumps like this. Once you've picked up the 30 stitches, it's going to look like this on your needle. And what you're going to do now is you're going to grab the second ball of wool, because we can't come in from the same ball because it's on the other end of the needles, but that's fine because we'll use it for this part here. So we're going to grab a second ball of wool, best feeling ever, and then you take the end and you grab your needle, stick it in like this. Just stick it in as if you're about to start knitting. Take the end of that new strand and just wrap it over the needle and continue to knit. You're now going to knit that row. I always knit the first 2 lines into the second stitch just to secure it properly, and then by the 3rd stitch I'll drop that loose end and continue with the original ball. Benny, if you eat my wool, I'm going to smack the bum. I've got a dog who very much is interested in learning to knit, hanging out behind me. Okay, so I'm just going to knit this row now, all the way to the end. Once I've arrived at the end of that line, you are going to apply the same cast on method like we did with the slippers, which is I'm going to cast on a stitch, knit that row, knit 2 rows. That should take me, so it's cast on a stitch, knit that row, knit 1, 2 rows, cast on a stitch, knit that row, knit 2 rows. And then what you're doing essentially is you're casting on a new stitch on opposite ends for every 3rd or so line, so that we don't rapidly shoot out. It's sort of more of a slow and gradual shoot out. And we're going to do that until this, my dog, I'm so sorry if you can hear him, is at the area of our armpit. So we want to go all the way out to the armpit. So that's going to be different measurements for you as it will be for me. So just this is going to be a crash course in intuitive designing. You're going to just cast on in this slow method until you get to your armpit area. I'll catch you when we get there. Okay, you can see what I mean by gradually increasing. It is going up slowly, and I'm going to keep doing this now until it reaches the armpit area. So I'll catch you when we get there. So if I put this over my neck now, I can see this is actually pretty much at the perfect armpit length. I'm going to go a few more lines because I'd like this jersey to be a little bit bigger and not too fitted. So I'm going to keep going. It's probably then going to be a long armpit, which is also going to result in a very large arm, but that is part of the pattern, a nice big bellowy arm. So the arm is going to take up all of this space, and if I keep going now, which I will do, and it comes up to about here, we're going to have a very big wide arm, which we're going to tuck in at the wrists. What I'm actually going to do now, just to make sure that the armpits or the arms aren't too big, although I do love a large arm, but if this is something that you would like to do as well, I'm going to now increase at the beginning of every line. So instead of having this gradual fade out, I'm going to literally just shoot out now like this. So for the past 10 lines, I've increased a stitch at the beginning of every line, and as you can see, it's now gone rapidly out here. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to knit for another 20 odd centimeters. So what I've done is I've measured from this point here down to where I would like it to be on my waistline, and I have already knitted around 24 centimeters, and I'd like it to get to about 44, which will literally be about button length. It's there. So I'm going to knit now for another 20 centimeters, just plain knit. Once you've knitted this to be the length that you want it to be, this part here, you can literally pick up the stitches on the other side and repeat the exact same steps. So you stick your needle in through here and you increase one every 3 lines. So knit a row, increase, knit 2 rows, increase, knit 2 rows, and you're going to go in the slow slope and copy the exact shape. So once you get to this part here, you're going to start rapidly going out, and you're going to knit out the exact same amount of stitches like you have here, and we're going to copy this exactly. Once you've knitted it down to the length that you want it to be, both sides, front and back, what you're going to do next is you're going to hold 2 ends by the sides together. And if you're happy with how that's fitting you, then the next part you can probably skip. But if, like me, you think that's a little too fitted and you've misjudged the gauge of it all and you possibly want this to be a little bit bigger, what we're going to do next is we're going to pick up these stitches on our needle and we're going to knit a little section over here. Pick them up just like this, like we did with the neckline, and I'm now going to knit 10 centimeters. Once you've knitted this little extension the exact length you want it to be, you can cast it off and you can do the exact same thing on the other side. Once we've added the extension to both sides, we're now going to grab our darning needle there, and we're going to sew up these 2 ends together, stitch by stitch, on that side and on this side. So we're going to join the 2 ends together here, stitch by stitch, like that. Okay, your jersey is now going to look like this. Sorry, it's very dark while I'm filming. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up all of these stitches here, exact same way that we picked up these ones here, and the exact same way we picked up these ones here, except that we're going to use our circular needles now, because this is going to be a very big and it's going to be a round space. So you're going to take your circular needle and you're going to start at the one end, and you're literally going to go in through these bumps. You're going to stick it in there and there and there and there until you have them all on your needle. So I've now picked up all of these stitches on my needle like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loose end right at the beginning and I'm going to attach a new ball of wool, and we're just going to knit for as long as we'd like the arm to be. Okay, this is what our jersey currently looks like. When you have knitted this arm out to be the length you would like it to be, and you've measured how long that is, you can literally pick up the stitches on the other side and you can do the exact same thing on the other arm. A little tip: if you are knitting white things and you have animals that have black fur and you're trying very hard to keep your knitting clean and white and pristine, is to put your knitting into a sleeping bag, a pillowcase, and knit it inside of the pillowcase, and that way you can keep control over what's actually touching your project. So yeah, that's just a little tip for you guys if any of you are struggling with the same problem that I am. So the arms are knitted out now to the length that I would like them to be, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring this end in. We're going to pull it in with a crochet hook. So I've got a long tail method, meaning that I left a lot of wool at the end of each arm when I cast off, and I'm going to use that wool now to go in and crochet these arms, sleeve, the wrists of the sleeve together to make a little bishop bowl shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in from that last loop like this, and then the next loop we're just going to secure those two together first. Pull that through, and then what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to count out every 2 loops. So the next one is 1 there, 1 here, so this is the next one here, and I'm going to crochet every second end together. So 1, 2, crochet that together. 1, 2, crochet that together. And I'm going to do that the whole way around now. One, two, until I arrive back at the first stitch over here. I'm about to come back around now, and I can see already that I'm going to have to do this one more time. You can see it's still not close in enough, but it's starting to gather nicely. So I'm going to go around a second time. And I'm about to come around for the second time, and this is perfect. This is exactly big enough for my wrist. I do want to mention that this particular method of closing up a wide gaping balloon, bellow or bishop sleeve in a jersey is going to take any elasticity out of that wrist. So because of the way that I've done this now, I won't be able to stretch this. So you want to make sure that your wrist does fit comfortably through that hole, and mine does perfectly. And that's what the sleeve looks like now. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, I finished my sleeves and they now look like this. This is beautiful. I'm absolutely obsessed. It looks amazing. Just to show you, that's what that looks like. And the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to turn the collar. To turn the collar, we're going to grab a darning needle and some wool, and we're just going to cut out maybe 1 meter. Thread the needle, and pull out a bunch, like not too much, just like so you don't lose that other end. Grab your collar, and then what we're going to do is we're going to run these little lumps, we're going to fold it over, and we're going to sew it into itself like this. That one's going to fold over and he's going to sew down like that. So what we can do is we can start at the bottom over, run that down, or yeah, start at the bottom here like that, and then run it up and grab it at the top like that and sew that through. This is going to take a bunch of elasticity out of your collar as well, so that's why you wanted to make sure that it was not too tight around your head. You'll still be able to squeeze your head through here, but if you've made this neck very tiny, it may make it very difficult for you to put this on. I tell you, the amount of times I've had to stop and pick little black hairs off this jersey has put me off ever wanting to knit in white again. I've got 2 animals and they both have, well, I've got 5. I've got a cat and a dog and 3 guinea pigs, but the cat and the dog both have black and white fur, and yeah, I don't think I'll ever be knitting anything white ever again. clever. Okay, so I'm just going to sew the neck around like this all the way through till I get to the other side. Just like that. Do one more. Go in there and through there. All the way through till we get to the other end. Okay, the neck is now turned. Our jersey looks like this. I cannot stress enough to you that once you've turned this neck, if it is too tight, you're already going to struggle to get your head in. Unless you've used an elasticated thread, which you can do, you can get a hold of that. I have not, so I did have to literally push my little head through here, but I did, and it's fine. So the same will apply with these wrists. So if you do not use an elasticated thread to bring them in, which is always advisable, if you use wool, just make sure you can fit your body parts through there. But here we are. This is the final product. I'm extremely happy with how this has turned out. I love these arms, I love the length of this, and we're now ready to begin the embroidery process. Okay, so I have embroidered and cut out and re-embroidered this jersey now a couple of times. I initially wanted to do more delicate embroidery on this, like actual with the embroidery hoop, and sew these beautiful ornate little blue Delft blue floral designs, but because of the thickness of the wool I have not been successful. So that's why I've come in and tried a lot of different techniques, and I've settled on this one. It just seems to be the easiest one. And I was going to make one more of these flowers up here and then document how I did that, but I've decided to just turn this last motif into a leaf, excuse the rhyme. And so I'm not actually going to be doing this, which means if I'm going to explain to you how I did any of it at all, I better start now. So basically what I did was I crocheted these long lines. Well, let me start at the very beginning, sorry. So what I did first off was I went in with a darning needle and some wool, and I just literally sewed these big lumps, circles, balls in here. And then in an alternate blue, I sewed these 5 little balls. I started with that. And then I crocheted these tubes, if you will. And I made these borders. So these are actually individual ones. So that's one there, that's one, that's one, and that's one. And what I did was I laid it down like this, and then I sewed it in with the embroidery needle, and then I came in with the darker blue, and I made the circle here, and then I sewed some extra blue detail into here, and then this I crocheted little chains and I sewed them down. This is actually the embroidery thread. And then with this one I literally did the exact same thing but in opposite colors. And now I'm going to just make a leaf over here, and then I'm going to be done with the work on this jersey. I don't want to go overboard because I don't want it to look too much. I actually was going to stop at the second flower, but I wasn't happy with how it looked because I just think the first flower looks so nice and this one looks less nice. But okay, I'm going to make a leaf now, and then I'll show you what it looks like after that. And here is the final product. A cropped white Delft blue embroidered jersey with bishop sleeves. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. This didn't quite go how I planned it. I don't hate it, but yeah, I'm still adjusting to the expectations in my mind of what I wanted it to look like versus how it's ended up. It looks okay. So for next week's tutorial, I'm going to teach you a little method that I came up with, a little knitting method that I came up with called the typewriter. It was before I learned how to do the stockinette stitch, which is basically the stitch. That's the garter, which we're all affair with already. And then this is stockinette. It was before I learned how to do that, and I had already figured out that when knitting on the round, it would create the stockinette stitch. And I put together that obviously if I'm knitting in the same direction continuously, then it's going to create the stockinette stitch. So I came up with this pattern called the typewriter method, where I would use multiple balls of wool, and I would knit and then start with the next ball and knit that line, start with the next ball, knit that line, and then knit all of those balls back again, and it would create this sort of like lumpy texture, like these ridges. So you'd have this pretty stockinette stitch, and then this lump sort of like ridge, stockinette ridge, stockinette ridge, and you can do it all in one color, or you can do it in multiple colors. And next week I'm going to teach you how to do that. We're going to make a jumper again, and it's going to be cool, so tune in and see you then.